Hi everyone, it's Alice, and today we are gonna do the last wrap-up of the year. So I read 3 books in December, but I actually want to start with the book I read in November because I only read 1 book and didn't do a November wrap-up, but I reread my favorite book for maybe the 4th time. It is, of course, The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I'm not going to talk about this too much, but it was great to reread, as it always is. Every time I pick this up to read it again, I am always a little bit anxious that it's not going to be as good as I remember it, but it always is. Now, the reason it took me a whole month to read is because I actually annotated it this time. Like, I annotated this whole book. It's my first time annotating a book, so it was quite an interesting experience, and yeah, I had a really good time rereading this book and like underlining, and really enjoyed it. I did make a whole reading vlog all about rereading this book and what it was like to annotate it, so I'll leave a link to that below if you want to watch it. But yeah, loved it, as always. Moving on to the books I read in December, first we have A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. This is like a YA fantasy adventure type book, and it's set in a world where there are several Londons. So we have Grey London, Red London, White London, and there used to be a Black London, but it's gone now. And before, you were able to travel between the Londons quite freely, but something happened that made them shut all the doors, and our main character is one of the few remaining people who has like a magical ability to still travel between the Londons. And because of that, he works as a sort of diplomat for the royal family of his London, which is Red London. However, he also has a little bit of a side hustle where he like smuggles things, and this thing that he does gets him into some really dangerous trouble. I really like this one, and I had a really good time reading it. This kind of fantasy, like there's something about it that just makes it very easy for me to get into and get a little bit lost in, which is great. Now, firstly, I really like the world that we get to see in here, and I really like the concept of all of these different Londons. And I really liked seeing our main character travel between them because they all have very different atmosphere, and I felt like I could really picture the different Londons and the different cities and just like the vibe of them because they're very different, and I thought that was very cool. There are some things about the world that aren't really explained, but I feel like it kind of makes sense because the characters that we're following, they don't really know about it either, like they don't have the answers, so that's maybe why we don't get the answers, and maybe in the next books we'll get to know more. For the characters, I really enjoyed reading about our main character who travels in between the Londons. He has an interesting backstory, and getting to know him was very interesting, and seeing how he like got through everything that he goes through in the book, I thought that was really interesting, and he has some interesting family dynamics that I really liked reading about. We are also following another character who is from Grey London, who gets whirled into this adventure, and I really liked the dynamic between the 2 main characters. They like bicker a little bit, and it's kind of like fun. I feel like that character isn't like the best developed character I've ever read about, and she feels a little bit stereotypical, but she was fun to read about nonetheless. When I was halfway through this, I went and ordered the other 2 books in this trilogy because I was enjoying this so much, so that's obviously a good sign, and I definitely want to keep going. I'm a little bit annoyed that I didn't have the books on hand so I could just keep going because I was so into it, but yeah, I really enjoyed this one. It may not be the most mind-blowing fantasy that I've ever read, but there is a lot that works in here for me, and I think the sort of adventure part of it is like great for me, and I think there's a lot of, I'm just really curious about a lot of things in this world, and I'm hoping the next books are going to show us some of that, so very excited about that. Really enjoyed this. 4 out of 5 stars. Then we have a book that I've had on my TBR for years. I've mentioned it in like a million TBRs, and it was getting a little bit ridiculous that I wasn't just reading the book, so I finally picked it up and I read it. It's Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. This is like a fantasy mystery type book, and in the beginning of this, we meet a man who lives in this place of infinite halls, and there are all of these statues in all of these halls, and there's like an ocean that can flood some of these rooms in an instant, but our main character lives there, and he lives to sort of explore this world. He only ever comes into contact with one other person who he refers to as the other, and the other visits him twice a week to sort of get him to help him with his research. But then, throughout this, it becomes apparent that there might be another person in these halls somewhere, and our main character wants to find them. And in this quest to find this person, this terrible truth unravels. So, I think I'm in the minority of my opinion of this book, and I have a lot of thoughts about it. I was so sure that I was going to love this book. This is a book that several people have recommended to me, and I totally understand it. And like a couple of years ago, there was a lot of hype around this book, and I just heard so many good things that I was so sure I was gonna like it. But to be honest, I feel very, very ambivalent about it, and I read it, and I was just like very underwhelmed, and I don't know if I really like it. I'm gonna try to explain. When I started reading this book, for the first 30 pages, I really, really struggled to get into it. It has a kind of bizarreness to it that I struggled with a little bit, and I was very confused. But then, I kept going, and I was like, okay, I feel like I'm sort of getting it, and then it becomes apparent, when you get to know the character, that there's something with him that makes him the way that he is. And when I sort of realized that, I was like, okay, that's interesting. Then, about a third of the way into the book, we get this reveal. And that is the reveal. It tells you what's going on. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. There must be more to it. But then there kind of isn't. I don't know if I'm just crazy, but I just don't really, it came on so early, and I was like, okay, this is what's happening. And then that was it. And then we spend, quite some time following a character, then trying to, figure out something that you've already realized. And I don't know, maybe that was the point of the book, us following him, because he has, an issue with his memory, and there's something about that, so maybe that's the point. But for me, I thought it was a little bit boring to follow a character trying to figure out something that you realized 150 pages ago. I do think this has some interesting themes, it explores isolation and loneliness, memory and identity, and so on, but I don't know. I don't know. I couldn't really get into it for whatever reason, and I'm really sad about it because so many people love this book. And I just wish that I did too. And I will say I went into this with sky high expectations, and I'm sure that affected my reading experience a little bit. But I do think even if I didn't have those expectations, I don't know if I would have liked it that much either way. Anyways, what can you do? Sometimes you read something and it just isn't for you, and honestly, maybe I'm stupid and I don't get it. That could be the case. I also wonder if part of the reason I couldn't get into it is because I had a really hard time connecting with the main character, which is also, again, maybe the point. But yeah, I was just a little underwhelmed by this, unfortunately. For me, this is a 2 out of 5 star read, but I will say, don't necessarily take my word for it, because there are so many glowing reviews of this book, and there were so many people who just absolutely love it. So I really, really feel like I'm in the minority. And although I wouldn't recommend it, I know a lot of other people would. And so maybe it's just me. But yeah, I'm really sad about it. I wish that I just loved it as much as I wanted to. Lastly though, I read another kind of weird book, which I got on with a little bit better. It's Earthlings by Sayaka Murata. And this is contemporary fiction with a little bit of horror to it. And it tells the story, it's kind of like a coming of age story about this girl who believes that she has these magical abilities given to her by her stuffed animal, who's like an alien. And she does this to escape her reality, basically, and the things that are happening to her. And she spends her summers like in this place in the mountains, and she hangs out with one of her cousins who also kind of escapes reality in his own way. And something terrible happens one of those summers, and the cousins, like, they're torn apart, but they promise each other that they're gonna survive no matter what. Then we meet our main character as she's an adult, and she's still very much like not living, she's just surviving. So I knew when I started reading this that it was going to be a little bit of a weird one, but my god, this is dark. And I was really surprised by not only how dark it got, but how quickly it got very dark. And I was reading this, and something happens to the characters, and I'm like, wait, what? And then 2 pages later, oh my god, what? What is happening? It sucked me right in though, like this felt very absorbing. And it is a deeply disturbing book, and it has like a starkness to it that presents these things to you in a way that I thought was really interesting. Like it's a little bit like matter of fact in a way, but it also feels a little rough because it's so dark, but I really, really liked it. There are also like comments about society in here that I really liked, and I liked how that tied into our main character's mind. Like it was very interesting. Now there is a lot going on in this book that I could talk about. Like it explores several different taboos, and it's quite disturbing, but I don't want to give too much of it away because I went into this book not really knowing much, and I think that that made for a really good reading experience because it was sort of shocking in a way that I thought worked really well. So I don't want to talk too much about what actually happens, but I will say like it is very deeply disturbing and it really takes you places. So if you're not in the mindset for it, maybe don't read it when you're not. But yeah, it was shocking in a lot of ways. It is very much a coming of age story though. It's about the loss of innocence and societal pressure and familial pressure, and in some ways it does have the same vibe as Convenience Store Woman in that we follow a main character that doesn't quite fit in, but it's like that on crack. Now I was actually gonna give this 5 stars up until the very end, where it just got a little bit convoluted for me and it lost me a little bit at the end. But yeah, this really made an impression on me, and it's a very strong 4 out of 5 stars for me. It really made me think, and it's still making me think, and I think it's a book that's really gonna stick with me. Don't read it if you're not into reading something really disturbing, but like, I would recommend it. It was very, very interesting. And yeah, it's gonna be a book that I'm gonna think about a lot. Alright, that was the last book, and I guess that sort of concludes my reading of 2023. I'm really excited about the new year. Like, I love reading when a new year rolls around. There's something really exciting about it that I just get really into, so excited about that. Now I'd love to know what you all have been reading lately. Tell me all about it in the comments, and as always, thank you for hanging out with me today, and I will see you soon. Bye!